My wife, Debbie, when we were in college, she was a great test taker. I mean, she could ace a test, uh, like with half her brain tied behind her back. I mean, testing she could just do. Me, not so much. But I mean, I've told you this before. She graduated cum laude, and I graduated. So, pardon me. Tests in life are different than tests in school. In life, many, I'll just put it that way, of the tests that we encounter are pass or fail. Sometimes you get tests in life that, okay, I got about a C plus on that, the way I handled it, or maybe on that rare occasion I got an A. But generally, either I come through a test or I don't, and then there's the idea of how well did I come through? I mean, because in life, the test is not just about the outcome. It's also about the process, right? Well, sometimes I fall into a trap of wishing life just didn't have, I just wish life didn't have so many tests. Well, I don't, realistically, that's not even a good wish, because what testing does is it sets you up for confidence, or for, some focused attention, in order to be ready for the future. Well, Paul talks about testing, and this is in reference to deacons, and we've talked about the character profile of a deacon is a good bit shorter, but I don't think it's any less, what's the word I'd use, tight, for a deacon than as it is for an elder all the way through. And we're in 1 Timothy chapter 3. In verse 10, Paul writes, they must first be tested. How do you test a deacon? Now, it'd be easy if you were going to just test Bible knowledge. You just throw a quiz with all kinds of questions about who was Methuselah's wife, and how long did he live, and how many people survived on the ark, and how many days were they in the ark. And I mean, this would be, people in an independent Christian church background might remember the days of the Bible Bowl. So you can give a Bible Bowl quiz, and a test of what do you know about the Bible. And that could be useful. I think most people, this is generally true about most things, but especially in terms of the Bible, a lot of church-going people think they know more about the Bible than they really do. Folks, it's a big book. It's thousands of pages long, many thousands of words and ideas, names that you can't even pronounce. Okay, so I don't think Paul is talking about a test of Bible knowledge here. I think he's talking about a test of character. How do you test someone's character? And, pardon me, why would you test it? Well, let's talk about how. If you're a parent, you know that releasing more and more responsibility to your kids as they grow up is a way of testing their character. And unless you're just very broken, and you're not, well, we are all broken. But as a parent, we wanted our kids to succeed. So this is not like I had a Latin teacher in high school. I would say I took Latin. The truth is, Latin took me. It was a killer. Anyway, her name was Miss Becker. Heavy on the miss. And we were pretty sure that Miss Becker had like been friends with Caesar and Brutus back in the days of the Roman Empire. She was old. Excuse me. Big, thick glasses, orthopedic shoes. I mean, she was the prototype for the musty old lady. And that's harsh. But if you had ever seen Miss Becker, you would say that's pretty spot on. She gave tests, and it felt like something's in my throat. Pardon me. When she gave a test, it felt like she delighted in flunking. I don't know what she was probably doing, is just testing our knowledge. Did we get first of all, had we studied? Second, did we get the material? Well, in my case, no and no. It felt like she gave a test and delighted in me flunking or making a bad grade. Worst grades I ever made in school, I made in Latin class. And that kind of a test, that's not what a parent does. We're testing our kids. We're testing their integrity. We're testing their ability and their response ability. With our hope is that they will pass the test, that they are growing and developing and maturing. The test that Paul's talking about, when he says test the deacon candidate first, has to do with because you want to confirm that they have the basic integrity and character and maturity that it will take to serve the church well. Well, the flip side of that, and it's this truth parenting, is you're testing your kids as parents to with the hope that they will demonstrate a maturity in their character and in their decision making and their responsibility. But if they don't, if at least you know where the gaps are, and you, as a wise parent, you can address those gaps with a deacon or this person. I take this to mean someone who we are thinking about giving the responsibility of deacon, or someone who desires the responsibility. They have to be tested as well. And we want them to pass the test, right? But if not, this will give us a more accurate profile, a more accurate picture of their maturity. Untested people in positions of leadership create, disaster on epic levels. Have you ever had an upline or a boss in your career who had been put in that position and not tested to, ensure or at least expose whether or not they had the ability and they're not great people to work with unless their character is really good. And so they, because their character is good, they realize where their gaps are and they work hard to bridge the gaps. Those people are not bad to work with or work for, but the other kind who, without testing, they just are plopped into a position of leadership. They are. Have you ever heard of the Peter principle? It doesn't have anything to do with the Apostle Peter. It has to do with a leadership guru whose last name is Peter. But here it is. An individual will rise to the level of their incompetence in an organization, meaning you will be promoted to the level of your incompetence. This makes for a difficult and hindered organization. And what Paul is saying, and the Holy Spirit, is that's not how we do this deacon thing. We don't do it with elders, and we don't do it with deacons. He says a deacon must first be tested. And then, if there's nothing against them, let them serve as deacons. This is it seems kind of negative after all my positive, it's not about flunking, it's about we hope you'll pass. Well, yeah, but if they don't pass, if it's not clear that they are mature enough to act in this position well, then don't put them there. But if they do, if there is nothing against them, which that's a pretty interesting concept. If there's nothing against them, what I get from that is they have been tested and they passed the test. Nothing against them. In other words, they reached the minimum requirement all across the board. There's a lot of times in my life that I reached the minimum requirement. But it wasn't stellar, but I was adequate. And I have known deacons who they weren't stellar, but they were adequate. Now, I'm grateful I have only known a handful in 45 years of men who were put in a position of deacon, and there really was stuff or something against them, but we did it in a democratic way. We had this election and they were elected. I mean, I don't want to be critical. I tend to be critical anyway. I mean, I try not to be. I don't want to be critical. I do think it's worth a little bit of a critical look at the process of how most churches who select elders and select deacons go through their process. The process for most churches that I have been around and know anything about is an election kind of thing. It is usually a written ballot election, secret ballot, and the votes are counted and accounted for, and that's if you've got enough votes, you got in. If you didn't get enough votes, you don't get in. I don't know. I don't. To me, it doesn't sound like Paul's advice or wisdom. Maybe it's command, but at the very least, it's wise advice for Timothy in regard to selecting leaders for the church there in Ephesus. It didn't have anything to do with elections. It was about an objective view and a testing of the character and maturity of people who wanted these positions of leadership and service within the church. I don't know. We live in a democratic society, and I think the churches I've ever been a part of are often mostly run on a democratic basis. And there are good things about that, but there are gaps in that. And I guess we'll talk a little more about that. But there is this other aspect of do we need these offices, these roles in the church today? We'll come back to that next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.